Well, a spiralling cost of car insurance is being blamed on a big rise in people claiming for whiplash when they've had a car accident. A report by MPs says insurance companies and lawyers ought to be better regulated. The number of casualties in road accidents has fallen by around a quarter in 6 years. A number of reasons for that. However, in the same period, the number of personal injury claims has gone up 70%. Last year alone, the average cost of car insurance rose 40%.
There are companies encouraging people to make claims they otherwise wouldn't have done, which results in increased costs for everybody, including on motor premiums. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of undisclosed money going around the system, adding to the cost of the premium for the ordinary motorist.
Well, Richard Davies from the Insurance Fraud Bureau joins us live from central London. Richard, good morning to you.
Good morning.
When we were discussing this story this morning, we were astonished to reflect upon the fact that we're talking about 500,000 cases of whiplash injuries and ensuing compensation a year. It's an astonishingly high figure.
It is a massively high figure, and insurance fraud generally is a very big concern for the industry, and it's why we've really upped our game in the last 5 years by setting up the Insurance Fraud Bureau just to deal with the problem of organised insurance crime.
On whiplash specifically, what have you done in terms of tightening things up?
Well, the IFB was set up to consolidate 128 million claims records into one big database. We can tell where organised crime is taking place. And what that's meant is that over the last 5 years, we've managed to secure an enormous amount of convictions and recoveries of money from those criminals, which will ultimately reduce the cost of premiums to the honest customer.
Yeah, so you're looking at hot spots, aren't you? I suppose that means there will still be an awful lot of people who get away with it. And that's because, I suppose, ultimately of the economics of litigation. If you're an insurer, you look at the costs of going to law and you think, actually, on the balance, we'll settle.
Well, the IFB is very closely focused on the problem of organised insurance crime because we know that the genuine customers are paying for the costs of those insurance cheats. We're clear that that needs to be stopped, and we're seeking prosecutions every single day to reduce the impact of the crash for cash and the dishonest injury claims on the honest customers, yes.
We all know, don't we, there is a kick-on effect for people in terms of increased premiums. But how common would you say it is now for people who would not consider themselves to be criminals to have a crash and their first thought is, I'll make some cash out of this. I'll claim I've had a bit of whiplash, very difficult to prove, £2,000 straight in the bank account, thanks very much.
Well, what we can say is that we're detecting even more insurance fraud than we ever have done. So last year we detected somewhere in the region of £919 million worth of fraud. That's 2,500 claims a week, which the industry is showing are not genuine. So it does tell us that there is, very much an opinion on behalf of many customers that they think that they can defraud an insurance company and get away with it. And the industry clearly doesn't want that. We don't think that's fair on honest customers, and that's why we want to reduce the £50 per policy which honest customers are having to pay purely to subsidise the cost of fraud.
Yeah. The Transport Select Committee says what it really needs is a few tough insurance companies to go to law and to set test cases which then raise the bar in terms of what has to be done. If that doesn't work, the Transport Select Committee says we need to change the law altogether. That's pretty drastic medicine. Would you approve of that?
I think the insurance industry can demonstrate that it's really put significant investments behind the insurance fraud fight. In particular, last week we set up a dedicated police unit to combat insurance crime. That's 35 officers who will focus only on insurance fraud. And I think that's testament to the attitude that we are going to take, and that is that insurance fraud is unacceptable. We are going to do everything we can to reduce it. And if that means that we need to seek changes to the law, if it means we need to seek prosecution so that people are locked up, that's exactly what we're going to do, purely because we don't think that honest customers should pay for fraud.
OK, Richard Davies is from the Insurance Fraud Bureau. Richard, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Whiplash makes up 70% of injury claims, as we said, and it's difficult for insurance companies to challenge.
With regard to whiplash, it's very difficult to establish whether or not somebody has suffered an injury. Jack Straw, for instance, described it not so much an injury as a profitable fabrication of the human mind. And we need to get to a situation in the UK where, perhaps like in France, you've only got a whiplash injury if you can actually show some physical evidence.
Ah, the physical evidence. Sammy Margot is a physiotherapist specialising in neck injuries. Sammy, thanks very much for coming in. The last contributor there making the point that in France they do things slightly differently. How easy, though, is it to fake whiplash?
As far as physiotherapists are concerned, it's very difficult. As physios, we're really well positioned to recognise those that are genuine claimants and those that are fakers. We know because we've been trained to recognise the patterns and recognise the difference between the real ones and those that are just in it for the money.
And you would need to lay your hands on, would you? Or could you just almost look at somebody, the way they held themselves, and start to feel a bit
When a whiplash candidate, whiplash person comes to us with a problem, what we do is we assess the problem, we talk to them at length, understand how it happened, the nature of the injury, and then we examine their neck range of movement and how they're actually moving. And we know, and then we lay our hands on, and then we can actually feel exactly what's going on. Just by chatting to someone, you can't get an indication of how severe their problem is. So physios are really well positioned because our training allows us to understand a real whiplash injury.
How's it caused? I mean, other than there being a crash, and how debilitating can it be? Because we ought to remember in all this that, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and when this law started out its life, it would have been to compensate people who were genuinely debilitated following a car crash.
So a whiplash injury normally is caused by an acceleration-deceleration force, either forwards and backwards like so that might be as a result of
I was hoping we'd get a demonstration, and I'm glad it's you rather than me.
Physios have to do that as a rear-end collision, or a side-on impact, which might be like that. Yeah. So it doesn't only happen in the context of car accidents, it can happen in sporting injuries and other environments. Now, what normally happens as a result of a whiplash injury is the candidate may experience neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, arm pain, hand pain. And in terms of how debilitating it can be, it could be as debilitating as preventing you from carrying out your work because you're in so much pain and suffering and agony, all the way through to not really much impact. Quite often the pain doesn't come on immediately. It may come on a few days later because there's a bit of a latent response, but it can be incredibly debilitating. And I think quite often the genuine cases don't always get picked up, whereas those that are screaming out loud and saying, oh, I've got a really bad whiplash injury, look at me, it really, really hurts. Those are the ones that come. Yeah, we're instantly suspicious.
You mentioned, I won't get you to repeat the demonstration you gave, the side impact and the side-to-side swaying. We buy our cars these days, and we know that there's airbags in every part of the car, it seems, not least the side. Have airbags made it worse or better, the problem of whiplash?
Airbags have actually made things a little bit better, but that's not necessarily translated into a reduction in claimants.
Right, OK. And in terms of what you're investigating, are you being tasked, are you being directed by the insurance companies to go in there and rumble the fraudsters?
Well, this is an interesting debate because actually the insurance companies tend to send people to doctors that then refer them on to physios, and actually what could be happening is they could be referred directly to physios that have the skill set to assess and diagnose how severe the problem is, and then the physios could then suggest how many sessions. Often we get patients that get told you need 3 sessions or you need 5 sessions, but we know how many sessions they need as physios. We're skilled at
and just one final thought, and very briefly, as a proportion of all those people who walk through your door with whiplash, how many of them are trying it on?
Probably we're in the 50-50 region. 50-50, it's quite a high statistic.
Well, keep showing the door, won't you, Sammy?
Indeed, yes.
Sammy Margot, who's a physiotherapist dealing with whiplash, which, as the figures today reveal all too clearly, is proving to be a big problem, not just for individuals and the insurance companies, but for all of us who are paying our car insurance premiums. Let's get you the business news with Joel.